Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thank you for having me on.
Kris, the employer health tax in BC, of course, the BC government didn't tell us when they removed the personal medical services plan premiums that the whole bill would be foisted on employers of small companies, and their definition of a small company stops at a payroll of 500,000. So what, 5 or 6 people, you're already there. Well, in reaction to this now, a pub in Victoria is now adding the employer health tax on their bills on top of the provincial sales tax, federal sales tax, and the liquor tax. What's your opinion on that?
This is a really wise move by the business owner of that pub and restaurant because it puts the issue of the tax front and center. It makes it very visible for the patrons and the customers of that business, and that way they can make their decisions accordingly. It's no longer just some hidden tax that a job creator is expected to eat. If they can make it more visible, the better. And the reason for that is it's so easy to just decide that you're going to tax businesses, to throw this huge burden onto their backs and expect them to take it silently. Meanwhile, the rest of us may not even be aware that the tax exists, may not even be aware of how much that is cutting into their bottom line. So we think this is a really smart move by this business owner, especially because apparently that pub is frequented by MLAs and their staffers, and hopefully the media that cover the legislature there in Victoria as well. So that is why it's probably getting this kind of attention. We think more businesses should do this if they're able to because it will spread awareness.
Now, again, this is a tax that's not based on your income or profitability, but just on the number of employees you have. And as we said, at a payroll of $500,000 being the limit, if you have 5 or 6 people, it's easy to hit that. I thought the official definition of a small business in Canada was 40 or 50 people.
Yes, exactly. And this is why we get frustrated with the provincial government when they keep saying things like, oh, this is only a tax on big businesses. Well, first of all, that quote-unquote big business could be a very big business like a sawmill that is employing hundreds of people and is central to the employment of your small town or city. Do we want to be punishing that big business? Are we going to be demonizing them? That's not a great idea because you're going to wind up costing people their jobs. It's one of the reasons why the mill shut down in Kelowna. Not the only reason, but it did play a factor, and it's something that the local Kelowna Chamber of Commerce flagged as an issue as to why that mill shut down. So that's number one. Number two, if you take a look at what these businesses are that are getting hit with this employer health tax, you're right, it's based on payroll only. So the moment that a payroll goes over $500,000, which is very easy to do, they now need to pay the employer health tax. It doesn't matter if they employ 5 people or 15 people. It doesn't matter what they're selling or what service they're providing. They're on the hook for this. The only ones that have now been exempted are not-for-profits, but municipalities, cities and towns, are also still on the hook. So that means in order to, say, pay for their police services or pay for their maintenance contracts to be kept up, roadways and keeping things safe, the 2 major things people expect from local governments, all of those services are now more expensive thanks to the employer health tax. This is a massive download of taxation responsibility from Victoria onto the backs of job creators and municipalities. And so we really want to get this word out. We want the NDP to back down and get rid of the employer health tax. We want them to keep their promise. Back before the last election, they were promising to get rid of the MSP, the Medical Services Premium, which is a good thing. We're glad they got rid of that. That's $1,800 on average per BC family that they're saving. What they didn't say is they were going to do a bait and switch, and they were going to simply put in the employer health tax. We're still paying it. We're just not as visible anymore, and that's why we're really giving kudos to that business in Victoria for making it visible.
Well, if you're going to put a tax on it, shouldn't it be progressive and based on income and profit, not based on the number of employees? Which again is, if you made $30,000 a year under the healthcare system before, you paid the same amount for healthcare as billionaires like Jimmy Pattison.
That's a great point. And if you look at it, they're basically just punishing people for employing people. Once you get over $500,000, it's a notched rate. And then you get up to $1.5 million for your payroll, and then you're at the full rate. But they're still kicking you in the teeth the moment you get over $500,000. And it's affecting businesses that some people wouldn't think of. So, for example, there's folks in the Fraser Valley, they're metal fabricators. All they do as tradespeople is put together those big metal tanks, those round cylindrical tanks that you see behind schools and businesses. They can hold all sorts of things. They are getting hit with the employer health tax because they employ skilled tradespeople. On average, it was costing this gentleman that runs this business an extra $60,000 a year last year. It was brutal. That is the starting wage of getting a journeyman out of trade school. That's where they first begin, is around that kind of money. That means they're no longer hiring him or her out of school. Or, put another way, that means that auto parts place up in Prince George is not giving their employees their annual wage increases. Even though they're great and they've earned them and they love how much they work, they just don't have the money for it. And it's directly because of the employer health tax. And so, one, their threshold is way too low. They set it at $500,000, whereas in other jurisdictions it starts at $750,000. And two, they're just really punishing people for having a payroll.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after the break.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, Recycling Trade Publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, you did a little math during BC's cold snap. We even had snow on the lower mainland, which doesn't happen all that often, but the temperature was the big difference, going down to -12, -9 in some places. And of course, once you get out of the lower mainland of Vancouver, a lot lower temperatures. What did that cost people in terms of the BC carbon tax?
That cold for a lot of British Columbians is quite shocking. It even broke a temperature record in Prince George, which is, the capital of tough people in British Columbia. It broke a temperature record there. Here in the Fraser Valley where we live, I couldn't believe it when I looked at my phone in the morning. Our wind chill was -29. I hadn't seen that number since I left Ottawa. Our pipes actually froze. So that was a serious cold snap that we just went through. And then I realized a lot of people are on natural gas. That's the way actually the majority of people in British Columbia heat their homes. And I started thinking, I wonder how much carbon tax people pay on average for an on average winter month on things like natural gas. The sin of keeping yourself warm and keeping your family warm. So I put out a call, and folks emailed me randomly their copies of their natural gas bill. Lo and behold, for example, a gentleman in Kamloops, for the month that, ending in December and beginning in January, so not including the big cold snap, but still a winter month, he had used about $24 worth of the actual natural gas, of the stuff. He paid a carbon tax of about $34 just on the carbon tax. There's GST added on top of that tax. So it's a tax on tax. So if you worked that out over the year, depending on how often or how high you kept your temperature in your home, you could easily be paying between $100 and $200 just in the carbon tax, just on keeping your pipes from freezing. It's outrageous. It reminded me actually of, back a few centuries ago in England, they actually had a candle tax. The government outlawed people making their own candles, and when you bought a candle to give yourself light in order to keep working after sundown, they would tax you for it. They kept that thing in place for 40 years. So it's one of those essentials of life that the government is making money off of. And we need to remind people they collected around $1.7 billion with a B in the BC carbon tax last year, and it's just being plowed into general revenue. So I'm really trying to encourage people to think about how cold you were during that cold snap, and remember, the BC government is taxing you for staying warm.
Also, too, in provinces where they've put in the federal carbon tax, they get a rebate back. It may not cover the entire tax, but at least they get some money back. How much money do British Columbians get back for paying carbon tax?
That is a great question. Next to nothing is the short answer. To give you the longer answer and break it down, the climate change rebate, I think is what it's called, or a refund program here in BC, it actually comes out it's added on to your GST or your child care, whatever other sort of, if you get any sort of a federal check, it is added on to that on a quarterly basis. But here's the catch. It only goes up, say you're a two-person working family, okay, got two kids and two parents, 4 people in the family. It only goes up to $399 for the entire year, maxed out. And it only applies in full if your family median income is $40,000 or less. That is for a two-person working family. Spoiler alert, the median net after-tax income for a two-person working family, so 2 adults working in BC, is $80,000. So when they say that we're going to help out the average person, the average working family won't feel this, the average working family gets a rebate in BC, that is not true. It's only a rebate for folks who make around $40,000 net after taxes. For anybody over and above that, it's whittled down by 2% over and above. And by the time you hit $50,000, you get nothing. So it really doesn't affect the average working family. It can help some folks who are very low income, and for that, that's good, because if they're paying carbon taxes on everything from their groceries to whatever sort of gas they can afford, they need every help they can get. But for the average working person, the commuter, they're not getting anything back. Nothing.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, a lot of debate about the former, I don't know what to call him now,
I know.
the half-royals, Prince Harry, Duchess Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex,
Captain
the Duke
retired
of Sussex,
Mountbatten and his wife Meghan.
and I mean, there was talk the Queen wanted to demote him from being a Duke and Duchess to the Earl of something, but you're not supposed to call him Your Royal Highness anymore. So I'm just going to call him Hank and Megs.
Hank and Meg?
Yeah, Hank and Megs.
If I were him, I'd go by Duke Hank. I just legally changed my name to those two words.
Or just call him Duke.
Duke. He is
Hey,
still
Duke.
technically a Duke. It's funny you should ask this, because I looked it up, because I was wondering, do I call him Mr. like Mountbatten Windsor? Do I go back to the original German name in the family? Do I go Captain? Because he's, of course, retired from the armed forces of Great Britain. He served 10 years. He rose to the rank of captain, served quite well, apparently. But what do we call him? So it turns out they're still the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. You can still call him Prince Harry, because he's still literally a prince. He hasn't been, like, kicked out of the family.
Deprinced.
But not yet. But no longer His Royal Highness. So the HRH is dropped.
Oh, well, I feel sorry for them. And I saw a thing, their personal worth of $40 million, nothing to cry about, but they're not in what we would call the ultra rich anymore. Although I'm sure a grandma, the Queen, wouldn't let them go broke either.
No, we're sure that if they needed a place to stay, that they could stay at any one of the Lieutenant General's homes. That's where they live in various provincial capitals. A lot of folks may not know this. That is officially property of Her Majesty the Queen. So Grandma owns all those homes, and if they really needed to, they could, I'm sure, go shack up over there if they needed to. But we're sure they're not having to. That's 36 acres of government house there in Victoria. But in all joking aside, I think people are really kind of mixed on this. We had more than 80,000 signatures in just 6 days on our petition, where there's this welcoming firmness. A lot of folks I talk to are actually really happy for them. They're pleased they're coming to live in Canada. They quite like them as a couple. Like we said, he does a lot of work for injured veterans around the world. I think people like them as a couple, but there's a big but. But no taxpayer money. The average hardworking Canadian taxpayer shouldn't be paying for the lifestyle choices of this rich and famous couple.
Of course, I think Canada is still negotiating or debating, because when a royal comes to visit, it costs millions of dollars to provide the coverage, but Hank and Megs want to be regular folks. So like regular folks, we do have city cops and the RCMP to look after us, and the armed forces in the case of a really big emergency. Harry, being a former officer who's been in combat, I'm sure could more than look after himself in a regular circumstance. So should Canadians be picking up the expense of security? Do we have to pay it? And on the other hand, would it be un-Canadian not to do it? We are very welcoming people, and I don't think we sent a bill to anybody for the thousands of people who had to land all over Canada after 9/11.
Oh, good point. And we take that very seriously, and you've got me thinking about Gander now. Anybody who hasn't read the story of what happened in Canada, and particularly in Gander, Newfoundland on 9/11, do yourself a favor and go read it, but bring a box of tissues. It's quite something. To the point on security. The average day-to-day security, we think that they can handle. So, for example, if a rich and famous actor or a rich and famous hockey player comes and visits and lives part-time up in Canada, he or she, yes, they have security, and yes, they pay for it themselves. That is not something that the Canadian taxpayer foots the bill for. We think that Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, the Duke and Duchess, are more in that category now. He's sixth in line to the throne of power. That would make him our head of state, by the way, in Canada. So he's sixth in line. They're more of a rich and famous couple now. They're more of a celebrity couple. So their day-to-day security, those dudes that you see walking behind them, they can pay for that. I think most people understand that they can afford that. In exceptional circumstances, we expect the right people to do the right thing. Like that, I think that goes without saying. But those would be exceptional circumstances.
Sure.
But on the day-to-day security, they can foot that bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they're doing something like opening a hospital or the Commonwealth Games, sure, they deserve extra security. Anybody would be, I think, under the same circumstances. But again, they said they'd be stepping back from so-called royal duties. When do they so now I have to pay Harry and Megs directly if they come or not? I mean, they're very charitable people. There's no doubt about it. And I think people don't realize just how much Meghan individually has been attacked, viciously attacked, brutally attacked by the British tabloid media, who A, don't like the fact that she's of color, and B, that she's an American.
Yeah.
How dare she steal one of our Brit lads?
Taking off my CTF hat for a moment, putting it aside, and putting on my own hat, and as a journalist, I was a journalist for about 20 years. I actually I've read a lot about our constitutional monarchy. It's a formal system of our governance, the entire family, and I've read through a lot of the tabloid press in the UK, and as a woman who follows this closely, it is quite shocking. It's more than I think a lot of Canadians realize. Like, Canada, we can really get and hound politicians if they're wasting our money. But as far as personal attacks goes, and that it's pretty low key here. You don't see that very often, especially not in the mainstream press. But over there, it certainly seems to be a different world. And frankly, if I came and visited Vancouver Island and got away from all of that, I'd want to come live there too. So there's a lot going on here. And what I found interesting, just as a kind of a royal history nerd, is the strange comparisons in the British press to Wallis Simpson. Wallis Simpson, for your listeners, and again, this is not CTF, this is my own thing that I've read about a lot. Wallis Simpson was, of course, the twice-divorced American woman who wed Edward VIII, but he was king of the Commonwealth, and they were literally at the beginning of the Second World War. They were in massive crisis. He marries her, the people refuse to accept it, and he quits. So that is why that was such a gigantically big deal. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, is marrying a prince with the blessing of the British people, who's sixth in line for the crown, and we're not, thankfully, at a state of war. The comparisons are bizarre.
Yeah, somebody said he's just one step ahead of King Ralph, if you ever saw that movie with John Goodman.
Oh, my goodness. No, it's one of those things where I get it's almost to a person, and I've gotten a lot of emails on this and even a few phone calls. They say, we really love Harry and Meghan. There seems to be a true and open affection for them here in Canada. But they say, we just don't want taxpayers to pay for it. And so actually, with that spirit, one of our supporters had made this recommendation to us last week. They said, how do we send the message that we're being firm about no taxpayers' money, but we do love you and welcome you here? And they had this great suggestion, and we just did it the other day. They said, why don't we put together a big welcome basket and donate it on their behalf? And so that's actually what we did. We put together a massive welcome basket with lots of warm socks and beautiful, nice, shiny shampoos and bath towels and warm blankets. And we donated it to the same women's shelter that she visited on the downtown east side. We went down there this week and we donated it in their name. And so I think that would actually be a really nice gesture for all the Canadians who really do love this couple and want to welcome them, but they don't want taxpayer money going to them. If you can manage it, try to see if you can make a donation to your local women's shelter in their name. It's a nice way to welcome them.
Also, I think they're going to get a lot of protection from BC residents. We pride ourselves on being cool.
Yes.
And there are loads of celebrities and famous people who live in Vancouver, Victoria. Oprah Winfrey's got a home there. But we don't fuss over them. If people make inquiries about them, if they're a neighbor, we tell them where to go. Mm-hmm. And the best example of that was the guy who just started a charter boat company in Victoria, who refused to take paparazzi off the coast to where Meghan and Harry were staying because he thought it was an intrusion into their privacy.
Isn't that a cultural difference? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the difference is British Columbians in particular, we love our celebrities, but if you were one of them, and we all think that we are, would you want to be bugged at dinner and have your picture taken or interrupted while you're out for a jog?
No, I don't think any of us would want that. And it's funny you pick up on the cool factor. That is kind of the feeling. It's almost like we're comfortable enough in ourselves, in our own worth, that if a famous person walks by, you're going to notice. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But you're not going to make a big whoopee deal over it, because otherwise you just draw attention and you make a fuss over something. And I find typically, generally speaking, most Canadians don't like making a big fuss. And that's why you'll see quite often former American presidents, they'll fly into Campbell River and go mass fishing. There's very, very rich and famous hockey players. Former world leaders go in there all the time in northern Vancouver Island. And you hear about it, but it's just chit-chat amongst your friends. You don't hear about it on the news, and they don't go up and take a lot of pictures. So I'm really curious to see if the star power of someone like Prince Harry, who is one of the most famous faces on Earth, is going to tip that scale. Does this mean that we're going to change as a media culture in British Columbia and in Canada? It's a darn good question.
Well, also, too, I know the British tabloid press had camped out and, tried to get photos and get people. Don't forget, too, the British use checkbook journalism, so-called journalism, where they'll pay somebody 50, 100 grand to dish dirt on somebody. And I think in a lot of cases, they just make it up. Would a Canadian resist that kind of thing to dish about Harry and Megs living next door, or would we tell them, take a hike?
That is a huge factorial difference, because most Canadian media outlets would not do that. They usually would not want to pay for something. Now, I've heard of sometimes if you have exclusive footage of a disaster or something like that, and you give a small stipend of compensation to the person who shot the video, that's different than what you're describing there. And you're right. Will that lure be too much? Will this start actually crossing international borders and creating coverage? It's a great question. But from a taxpayer perspective, we keep trying to remind people we already pay quite a bit of money for the monarchy because it is an official form of our government. It is ingrained, it's enmeshed, it's right there, it's on all of our currency, it's part of how we live here in Canada. But what I find fascinating is they say that's enough. They draw a line and they say there shouldn't be more spent, especially because these folks are making a personal lifestyle choice to step back, to leave their official duties, and to try their best to become private citizens. And private citizens just get the standard amount of funding here in Canada.
Of course, Prince Harry could be named Lieutenant Governor of BC, Alberta, Ontario, or even Governor General of Canada.
Sure.
If they still wanted to collect a government paycheck.
Sure, and then he would get his salary as expected, but we wouldn't treat him any differently in the sense that, for example, I don't know if a lot of people know this, our former, and we mean 3 or 4 back former governors general, still bill us for their expenses, sometimes to the tune of $100 grand a year, sometimes without any receipts. It's just mind-boggling. Adrienne Clarkson is one of them. She's one of the reasons why we've given her our Teddy Waste Awards. We've given her a Lifetime Achievement Award because the amount of taxpayers' money that goes to them. That's got to stop. Once they leave office, they need to get off of the expense gravy train. So we would treat him exactly the same way we would treat any other Governor General. But if he wants to earn his bread by being Governor General, there's nothing stopping him.
Well, I wish the best of luck to them, and personally, I do wish they settle down somewhere on the BC coast. They'd be more than welcome, and their neighbors will look after them.
And it's a nice spot for them too, if you think about it, because there's such a big film scene in Vancouver, and Meghan Markle is an accomplished actress. She could work over in Vancouver, and also we've got CFB Esquimalt. They've got helicopters right there. And we know Prince Harry had served so well in Afghanistan. He's, in my other previous life, I worked very closely with veterans in Canada. He's very well respected within the veteran community and the law enforcement community here in Canada. So there's lots of opportunity there for them to do a lot of good and to earn their own way. So we think it's going to eventually become a very nice news story. We just don't want to see this dinging the average person.
Kris, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Her website, taxpayer.com. It has her email and so on it. If you want to contact Kris or any other guests that we have, you can send an email to us to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.